kicked out, holding her child, without imagining that the one watching would change her life. Before we dive into this emotional story, take a second to subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. We're aiming to reach 1,000 subscribers. And if you enjoy love stories full of emotion, resilience, and heartwarming endings, your subscription will make all the difference in helping this channel grow and keep bringing you stories that truly touch the heart. Let's go on this journey together. The Phoenix sun seemed to burn even hotter that late afternoon. The streets of the modest neighborhood were dry, and the heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt, as if the ground itself refused to welcome Valeria Mendoza's steps. She hurried down the stairs of the two-story building, trying to balance her 4-year-old son in her arms, an old backpack on her shoulders, and a suitcase with a broken zipper. Nico, skinny, wore a faded blue t-shirt with a barely visible dinosaur on the front. He slept against his mother's shoulder, unaware of the silent pain she carried in her chest. The apartment door slammed shut behind her with a sharp thud. From above, the building manager's cold voice sliced through the air like a blade. "You had your chances, Valeria. 3 months late. We have rules here." She didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the hot wind stirred up the desert's red dust. Valeria walked with difficulty to the sidewalk, her eyes stinging, not just from the light, but she didn't cry. She couldn't, not with Nico in her arms. "Let's go, my love. Mommy's here," she whispered, kissing the boy's forehead. Her voice trembled, but she masked it with firmness. She sat down for a moment on the curb, under the shade of a dry tree. She set the suitcase beside her, trying to rest her arms. Her hands ached, her back throbbed, and the exhaustion of the past few months seemed to crash down all at once. She closed her eyes for a second, just 1 second. Across the street, inside a black SUV discreetly parked, a man was watching. Logan Whitaker, CEO of a clean energy startup, was waiting for a client from one of the nearby commercial buildings. But when he saw Valeria walk out carrying her son, something stirred inside him. It wasn't pity, it was a deep recognition. That woman, he knew her. "No way," he murmured, adjusting the rearview mirror to see her better. She looked different, thinner, more worn down. But it was her, the same woman who used to smile behind the counter at the coffee shop where he and his mother used to go years ago. She would draw hearts on the coffee lids, say "good morning" with sincerity even when her world was probably already falling apart. And now, there she was, on the ground, alone with a child. Logan dropped his phone on the passenger seat, unsure. His hand was on the door handle. Should he help? Or would that be too invasive? After all, she wouldn't even know who he was. But when he saw Nico stir and Valeria softly singing to soothe him, "Little star, shine in the sky, make a wish for me," Logan's heart clenched in a way it hadn't in years. Valeria, meanwhile, looked up for a moment, and their eyes met, just for a few seconds. But it was enough for him to see the pain in her eyes, and for her to see a stranger with a different look. Not one of judgment, but someone who somehow understood. She looked away and stood up with effort, dragging the suitcase. "Come on, Nico. Mommy's going to find us a place today, I promise." She didn't know it, but that moment, that brief glance in the middle of the urban desert, would be the turning point in her life. Because sometimes the deepest love stories don't start with kisses, but with invisible gestures from those who choose not to look away. The sidewalk scorched beneath Valeria's feet, even through her worn-out sneakers. The heat from the asphalt seemed to reflect the anguish rising through her body like a fever. She held Nico tighter with her left arm, trying to shield him from the sun with the brim of an old cap she'd placed on the boy's head. With her other arm, she dragged the rolling suitcase with effort, feeling her shoulder throb with every step. Nico, now awake, rubbed his eyes with his little hands and said in a sleepy voice, "Mommy, are we going home?" She didn't know how to answer. She smiled with tenderness, even with tear-filled eyes. "We are, my angel. Mommy's just looking for a cooler place, okay?" The boy nodded, trusting. He still believed she could do anything, and that hurt more than any judgment. As she crossed the street, Valeria didn't notice the eyes still and following her, but Logan, still seated in his black SUV, couldn't look away. From the driver's seat, he leaned his head back slightly, thoughtful. Logan Whitaker, 35 years old, wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, his tie loose, like someone coming from a tough meeting. But it was the scene before him that unsettled him. Not contracts, not shareholders. That woman, it's her, isn't it? He murmured to himself, as if he needed to confirm it. Yes, it was the same young woman who used to serve cappuccinos with heart-shaped foam art and smiled even when no one smiled back. He remembered the cinnamon scent of her apron. Remembered her hazel-brown eyes that never hid when something was wrong. And now there she was, walking in silence and sweat, as if carrying the weight of the world on her back, and love in her arms. The suitcase hit the broken sidewalk and fell sideways. The zipper tore even more, and a few clothes scattered onto the dusty ground. "Oh no, not now," said Valeria, crouching quickly, holding Nico with one hand and trying to gather the clothes with the other. A light blue t-shirt flew with the hot wind and landed in the middle of the street. Valeria hesitated, looked around, and ran after it, nearly stumbling. A car honked in the distance. She came back, heart racing. "Sorry, baby, Mommy's a little clumsy today," she said with a faint smile, still breathless. Nico looked at her with wide, trusting eyes. "It's okay, Mommy. I'll help you find a castle." Valeria pressed her lips together, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "That's right, my love. We're going to find our castle." Logan swallowed hard. That sentence, said with so much hope, broke something inside him. He shifted in his seat, opened the door, but stopped. "Don't get involved, Logan," he muttered, unsure. "You don't know anything about her life. You don't know what she's been through." But he couldn't move. He couldn't drive away. That woman pulled him like a silent magnet. Not because of what she said, but because of everything she didn't say. On the other side of the street, Valeria picked Nico up again and began to walk aimlessly. The sun was slowly setting, painting. The sky a burnt gold, as if the desert was about to swallow them whole. And still, she kept her head held high. She was fragile, but she didn't break. Logan, from the driver's seat, followed her with his eyes until she turned the corner. And even after she disappeared from view, he stayed there, as if something inside him had stayed with her. Doubt crept into his mind. Why did she show up today of all days? His phone buzzed with a meeting notification. He looked at it and ignored it. Because, for the first time in years, something was more urgent than business. And on the other side of the city, Valeria held Nico tightly against her chest and whispered like a prayer. "Just one more day. Just one more step, and life will change." She didn't know it, but someone was already ready to change everything. The days that followed felt ordinary to everyone, except Logan Whitaker. He sat in his glass office on the top floor of the company's headquarters, staring at the blinking emails on the screen like distant noise. But it was her face that filled his thoughts, the woman on the sidewalk, those brown eyes, the boy in her arms, the torn suitcase. Something about that scene held him from within, as if it had opened a forgotten window to his past. "This doesn't make sense," he told himself. "She's just a stranger." But she wasn't, and he knew it. It was on the third day, after a meeting with investors, that Logan decided to personally visit the community center his foundation helped fund. It was something he rarely did. He preferred to delegate, but that day, for some reason he couldn't explain, he went. When he arrived, the muggy heat of the center clashed with the icy air conditioning of the corporate offices. Children ran through the narrow hallways. Volunteers handed out food and clothes in cardboard boxes. The place smelled like cheap disinfectant and hope. And then he saw her. Valeria, with her back to him, was stacking soup cans on a makeshift shelf. She wore a faded yellow t-shirt and loose jeans with dried paint stains. Her dark brown hair was tied in a hurried bun, with a few loose strands gently framing the nape of her neck. Nico sat on a colorful rug, playing with two other boys. He looked okay, but his eyes carried the same quiet loneliness as his mother's. Logan froze for a moment. Time stepped back. The memories came like a gust of wind. The cafe in downtown Phoenix 4 years ago. He and his mother always sitting at the same table by the window. His mother, already weakened by illness, would smile whenever Valeria brought over their coffee. "This is my favorite moment of the day," she used to say. And Valeria, with that kind smile, would reply, "Then let's make this moment last a little longer." That time was one of the last when Logan still believed love was real. After his mother passed away, he stopped going to the cafe, stopped smiling, stopped feeling. And now, that woman who used to sweeten his mother's coffee with simple words was the same one he had seen being evicted with a child in her arms. "Logan, Mr. Whitaker." One of the coordinators came over, breaking the silence. "Ah, yes, sorry, I was just..." He covered, pointing toward the shelf. "Does she work here?" The woman smiled a little cautiously. "She helps however she can. She's staying in one of the rooms in the back with her son, Valeria. She arrived a few days ago. She's been a blessing." Logan nodded, trying to look neutral. But inside, something was burning. He approached slowly. Valeria turned around, with 2 cans in her hands, and froze when she saw him. Her expression changed from surprise to suspicion in seconds. "You?" she said, instinctively glancing down at Nico. Logan noticed the gesture and raised his hands, as if not wanting to intrude. "Sorry, I don't want to scare you. I saw you the other day and..." Valeria cut him off, direct. "Why are you here?" He took a deep breath. "Because you reminded me of a part of myself I thought was gone." Her eyes widened, confused. She hadn't expected that. "You used to work at a coffee shop downtown, remember? I used to go there with my mom. She was sick. You were the only light thing in some very heavy days." Valeria, unsure what to say, looked away, touching a simple necklace, a gift from her mother, now gone. "That was a long time ago, Mr. Whitaker." "Logan," he gently corrected. A strange silence filled the space. She didn't know if she could trust him, but something in his eyes didn't feel like a lie. It looked like pain and honesty. "Do you need anything?" she asked, trying to keep her distance. He hesitated, then answered, "No. I just wanted to say thank you, and maybe give back a little of what you gave me without even knowing it." Valeria stood still for a few seconds. Then, without smiling, she simply nodded. "Thank you for remembering," and went back to stacking the cans. Logan took a step back, respecting her space. But before leaving, he looked one last time at Nico, who was now watching him quietly, as if trying to recognize him. As Logan walked toward the exit, he knew something had shifted. It wasn't just the memory of the cafe. It was the fact that, after years of success, power, and loneliness, he had finally found a reason to return. And he had no idea how many truths were still waiting to come to light. 2 days later, the heat in Phoenix remained merciless. The parking lot next to the community center was nearly empty, except for a few old cars under the sparse shade of trees. The asphalt shimmered under the midday sun. Valeria walked slowly, plastic bags hanging from her thin arms, her body hunched from the weight and exhaustion. Nico slept soundly in her arms, his brown curls stuck to his sweaty forehead. Her t-shirt, already damp, clung to her back. Her feet ached inside worn-out sneakers. With each step, Valeria fought the urge to stop and just collapse. That's when, from across the street, Logan saw her. He had returned to the center to deliver a shipment of donated computers to the foundation, but his eyes were immediately drawn to the silhouette he recognized. Without thinking, he crossed the street with firm but careful steps. He didn't want to scare her. He just wanted to be near. "Let me help you," he said, stopping in front of her with a voice softer than he expected. Valeria slowly looked up, surprised. For a moment the sun seemed to fade. Time slowed down. Her hazel brown eyes met his blue ones, and for a silent instant, the outside world disappeared. She hesitated. Her arms trembled under the weight of the bags, but what held her back from accepting wasn't pride. It was fear. Fear of depending. Fear of believing. "I'm fine," she replied, trying to shift the bags and her son in her arms at the same time. But one of the bag handles ripped, and the cans fell to the ground, rolling across the hot concrete. Valeria quickly crouched down, not realizing tears were forming. "Sorry, Nico. Mommy's clumsy today." Logan crouched down with her, picking up the cans. His hands touched hers for a brief second. The touch was light, but full of an unexpected energy, as if a memory that hadn't happened, yet lived there. "You don't have to do everything alone, Valeria," he said, almost in a whisper. She froze. The way he said her name, it wasn't like someone who thought he was better. It was like someone who wanted to learn how to say it carefully, with respect. She looked at him, eyes misty, but didn't pull away. "I'm not used to having help," she said, her voice cracking. "Maybe it's time to get used to it," he replied calmly. Silence. Nico stirred in her arms as if sensing the tension. Easing, Valeria took a deep breath and gave a small nod. Logan picked up the bags and walked beside her toward the building entrance, saying nothing more. The gesture was enough. On the way, she glanced over at him. The sunlight hit his face, revealing tired lines around his eyes, as if he too carried something no one else could see. When they reached the door, she opened it with her shoulder, and he followed, still holding the bags. "You look like a CEO with a delivery man's calling," she said, for the first time with a hint of humor. He smiled, one of those rare smiles that hadn't shown up in a long time. "If it's something worth carrying, I don't mind." Valeria looked away with a faint smile that didn't last long, but left something in the air. That afternoon she saw him differently, not as the man with the expensive suit and luxury car, but as someone who had lowered both his body and his pride to help her pick up what the world had knocked down. And he saw her beyond the exhausted woman in the parking lot. He saw the woman who, even broken, still refused to fall. Inside, Nico woke up, and seeing Logan, smiled with a curious sparkle in his eyes. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Valeria turned, surprised by the question. Logan looked at her, then at Nico. "I can be if she lets me." And for the first time, Valeria didn't answer with words, but with a look that said, maybe, just maybe. She didn't know it yet, but that simple gesture, picking up bags from the ground, had been the start of something much bigger, something that neither time nor the wounds of the past would be able to stop. 2 days after the meeting in the parking lot, Logan returned to the community center earlier than usual. He carried a box filled with new materials for the children's glasses, colorful books, crayons, educational toys, but that wasn't what made him glance around with barely contained anticipation. He was looking for Valeria. When he found her in the side yard, surrounded by a small group of children sitting on the ground, Logan stopped at a distance, watching silently. Valeria wore a simple white blouse tied at the waist in a makeshift knot and worn-out jeans. Her hair was down, dancing in the light breeze of that late morning. She was telling a story with her hands, using theatrical gestures, making the children laugh. Even there, in that worn-out yard with old toys and peeling walls, Valeria seemed to light up the space, making everything around her shine brighter. And then the little bunny said, "I don't need a big house, I just need a little corner where I can be happy," she said, touching her heart with her hand dramatically. The children clapped with laughter. Logan smiled, not the calculated kind he used in meetings, but a real one, with his eyes. She saw him by chance and paused. The children's smiles didn't stop, but hers faltered. Logan walked over, crouching beside a boy, holding a piece of paper. "Can I watch the next story?" The children laughed and shouted, "Yes!" Valeria crossed her arms, caught off guard. "You're always around here now, huh?" she said, trying to sound casual. "Maybe I found a better reason than meetings to leave the house," he replied, looking her straight in the eyes. Valeria looked away. She still didn't know how to handle that. Someone who saw beyond the surface. After the kids ran off for snacks, Logan stepped closer. "I've been thinking, and I wanted to make you an offer." She raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "An offer? You have a gift. And I'm not saying that to be nice. You have a way with these kids, with people. I saw it. They feel safe with you, and that's rare. I need someone like that at the foundation. As an assistant, it's a paid position, flexible hours, and you can keep bringing Nico." Valeria frowned, defensive. "You trying to give me charity?" "No," he said firmly. "I'm trying to give you a chance, and I want you to take it for you, not for me." She took a deep breath. Her heart tightened with old memories of broken promises, of offers that came with a price. But something in Logan's tone was different. There was no rush, no control, just truth. I need to think," she replied, almost in a whisper. "Take your time, but know that you're already changing more lives here than a lot of people with big salaries." Valeria bit her lip, holding back an involuntary smile. "You're good with words. I bet you've convinced a lot of investors with that voice." "Maybe, but I've never used that voice to convince someone who actually mattered." She didn't respond. But that night, as she put Nico to sleep, she stared for minutes at the small note Logan had quietly left with the new toys. Sometimes, all someone needs is a gentle invitation to start again. And as her eyes scanned the words, written in firm and elegant handwriting, a part of her heart that had been asleep for a long time began to wake up. She didn't know yet if she'd accept, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to try. That night, the community center was celebrating. Simple Christmas lights hung from clotheslines, flickering in the warm breeze, lighting up the yard like humble stars doing their part. The fundraiser had exceeded expectations. Food collected, smiles shared, hugs exchanged. Valeria was glowing, even though her feet ached in old sneakers and her shoulders were tired from the long day. Logan watched from afar, leaning against one of the wooden columns holding up the makeshift canopy. She danced with some children, spun lightly with Nico in her arms, and for a moment he saw her like he'd never seen anyone before. Whole, even in pieces. Strong, even while carrying scars. Later, when the party ended and the last guests said their goodbyes, Logan offered her a ride to the shelter where Valeria was temporarily staying. She politely declined. "It's just a few blocks away," she said, adjusting the bag on her shoulder. "Then let me walk you," he replied, in the gentle tone of someone who wasn't asking for permission, just showing up. They walked side by sighed through the quiet streets where the streetlights flickered as if unsure whether to light the way or leave it in darkness. The sound of their steps on the asphalt was broken only by the warm breeze and the rustling of dry trees. For a few minutes they said nothing, until Valeria spoke without looking at him. "You really don't have to do this." "Do what?" "Get close. Try to understand. I know you have a life. Clean, organized, shiny. And well, I'm just a scribble in the corner of the page." Logan stopped walking. She took 2 more steps before noticing. When she turned around, she saw something in his eyes she didn't expect: pain and a desire to heal. "I don't have anything like what you think, Valeria," he said. "Shiny. Life only shines on the outside. On the inside, I've been lost for a long time." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she kept walking without saying another word. In front of the shelter, the silence grew heavier. The simple building had a dim light at the entrance, and the old sign flickered like a tired whisper. When Valeria stepped onto the first stair, her foot twisted slightly on a loose edge of the concrete. She almost fell, but didn't, because he caught her. The bag slipped from her arms, her body pressed against his, her breath landed on Logan's chest, and their eyes met as if they'd always been searching for each other. For a moment that lasted more than time, they stayed like that, too close, too alive. His face leaned in slightly, his lips nearly touched hers, but Valeria gently pulled back, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing. "I can't fool myself," she whispered, swallowing hard. "You're from another world." Logan, still close, his hand at her waist, answered without hurry. "Yours is the only one that makes me feel alive." Valeria's chest tightened. A tear escaped, uninvited. She slowly stepped away, picked up the bags from the ground and murmured, "Good night, Logan." Before he could say anything else, the shelter door closed. He stood there, frozen, staring at the wooden door that now separated him from her. His hand still outstretched where just a second before there had been warmth, skin, heart. And even without a kiss, he knew. Right there, on that cracked stair, something between them had broken. But also, something had opened. The morning. After the almost kiss, the air felt heavy with something invisible. The sky over Phoenix was covered with thick clouds, as if the city itself felt the weight hanging over Valeria's heart. Nico woke up pale, with a high fever and labored breathing. Valeria tried to stay calm, wetting cloths and humming softly, but nothing helped. The boy trembled in her arms, his eyes dull, his skin burning hot. Panic gripped her chest like an invisible hand. Without thinking twice, she ran with him in her arms to the community center. When she arrived, nearly stumbling from how breathless she was, Logan was there, delivering food baskets to a newly registered family. When he saw her rush in like that, sweaty, desperate, with her limp son in her arms, he ran to her without hesitation. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes wide. "He's burning up. I don't know what to do. Logan, please." She didn't need to say anything else. Minutes later, they were in the back seat of Logan's SUV, heading to the nearest, a private hospital. Valeria held Nico against her chest as if he were part of her body. Logan drove in silence, jaw clenched, eyes focused on the road, but his heart in pieces. The hospital was modern, with wide hallways and the scent of disinfectant in the air. A doctor met them quickly. After initial tests, she ordered a genetic panel suspecting something rare. Nico's body reacted unusually to common medications. It was important to know his full blood type. Valeria signed the papers with trembling hands. Logan stayed right beside her the entire time. Hours passed in silence. Then the doctor returned with the test results and a curious expression on her face. "Are you the child's parents?" she asked, looking between the two of them. Valeria nodded slowly. Logan hesitated. "I'm a friend. I'm helping. The doctor furrowed her brow slightly. It's just that there's a rare genetic marker. The child has an extremely rare blood type, BRH null. Unless there was a spontaneous mutation, he could only have inherited it if at least one biological parent also had it. She turned to Logan, and that happens to be the exact blood type you listed on the emergency form. Valeria froze. The ground vanished beneath her feet. The sounds of the hospital turned into distant echoes. The doctor's words hung in the air, like a silent sentence. Her legs gave out, and she slowly sank into a chair in the waiting room, clutching her chest. Logan looked at her, stunned. Valeria! Her eyes filled with tears, but they weren't from surprise. They were from guilt, from pain held in for years. I tried to find you, Logan. I swear to God I did. You disappeared after your mom passed. You changed your number, your address, you vanished. Logan stepped closer, kneeling in front of her. Is it true? He whispered. He's my son? She nodded, tears falling freely. It was just one night. After she died, you were so lost. And I was too. Neither of us was ready. I didn't want to seem like I was trying to trap you or ruin your life. Logan stood up, took a few steps back, and ran his hands over his face like he needed to breathe again. He looked down the hall, where Nico was being treated. He stayed silent for several seconds. When he turned back to Valeria, his eyes were misty. He has your eyes, he said, his voice tight. But his heart, it's just like mine. Valeria sobbed harder. It wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was recognition. It was love. Logan sat beside her, not touching, but close enough so she'd know he wasn't going to leave. Not anymore. And there, between monitor beeps and the scent of rubbing alcohol, love was revealed not through sweet words, but through the blood silently linking three hearts that had always been connected. The days following the hospital revelation were quiet, almost cruel. Logan disappeared. No calls, no texts, no visits. Valeria tried not to show it, but his silence was eating her alive. She kept up her work at the community center, took care of Nico, now recovered, smiled for the kids, but her eyes were always far away. During the nights after her son fell asleep, she sat by the small window in the shelter room, staring at the empty sky and trying to convince herself it didn't hurt as much as it did. You knew this could happen, she whispered to herself, arms wrapped around her knees. He has an entire life out there, a name, a legacy. You're just a dot outside his map. But no matter how much she tried to believe it, there was now an emptiness where hope used to live. And it was that emptiness that kept her awake, until one afternoon, when the Phoenix sky was glowing especially golden, Valeria was walking down the shelter's front steps when she saw him. Logan was there, standing at the bottom of the stairs, wearing dark jeans, a light blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his eyes glassy, and in his hands, a yellow flower. The same kind she used to care for at the cafe years ago, when everything still felt possible. A simple flower, but one she used to say, jokingly, could survive anything, just like her. Valeria froze, heart pounding. He took one step up, as if asking permission to keep going. I didn't run from you, he began, his voice low but steady. I ran from everything I felt, because I felt too much. Because I saw myself in a place where I wasn't in control anymore. And for the first time in years, the control wasn't mine. She came down the last few steps, still silent. Her eyes locked on his. I thought I was ready to live again. But I wasn't, Logan continued. Not until I saw you with him, with our son. Not until I realized what I'd lost, and what I still could lose if I kept hiding. He held out the flower. His hand trembled. I'm sorry for running. I was afraid to love. Valeria took a deep breath. The tears came like a wave that had been held back too long. They weren't from hurt. They were from everything she had held in every no she had told herself so she wouldn't suffer. "You broke my silence, Logan," she said, her voice trembling, "and I don't know what to do with all the noise that's left inside me." He let the flower fall to the step, and in a sudden impulse held back for years, he wrapped his arms around her. The hug was firm, yet full of care. She cried silently against his chest, and he simply held her as if trying to protect her from everything, even from herself. Then slowly he pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. There was no doubt, no rush. Their lips touched. It was a slow kiss, full of longing, pain, and promise. A kiss that said everything words couldn't. A kiss that spoke of a love that wasn't born in that moment, but had survived in silence, waiting for the right time to bloom. On the hot sidewalk of Phoenix, with the sun setting behind the buildings and a soft breeze passing between them, two once distant worlds finally met, as if they had always belonged to one another. And from the window of the shelter, Nico watched, them with a small smile on his lips and his eyes shining. He didn't understand everything, but he felt it, and that was enough. Life didn't change overnight. There were no grand promises, no fireworks, but there was presence, and for Valeria that was more than everything. Logan didn't return to the fancy penthouse or the luxury car he left parked at the company garage. He rented a small ground-floor apartment in a modest neighborhood near the community center. 2 bedrooms, walls stained by time, wood floors with scratches, and a tiny kitchen with a noisy fridge. And it was there that they began to build for the first time something that couldn't be bought. Valeria arrived with Nico on a cloudy afternoon. Logan had already laid a simple rug on the floor, 2 new pillows, and a yellow flower in a glass on the kitchen counter. "It's just the beginning," he said as she walked through the door. She didn't answer. She just smiled, the kind of smile you tuck away in your heart. In the first few days, Logan stumbled through everything, literally. He spilled a bag of rice trying to grab a pan, burned the first batch of coffee, oversalted the pasta, and nearly added sugar to the sauce. Valeria laughed with her eyes shining. "You're a CEO, but you can't even fry an egg," she teased, cleaning the mess beside him. "I'm adapting," he said, pretending to be offended. "You should give me an intern badge." At night, when Nico had nightmares and ran to his mother's bed, Logan lay on the floor beside them without complaint. He stayed there, holding his son's hand until sleep came. Valeria, lying nearby, watched in silence, her chest filled with a tenderness that no longer fit inside her. Mornings became gentle. Logan woke up first and made lopsided pancakes, but full of care. Valeria taught him how to save water, shop at the local market, understand the neighbors, and he listened like someone learning a new language. One day, while the 3 of them were decorating a cardboard box to use as a bookshelf, Nico pointed at them and said, "We look like a real family." Valeria froze for a second. Logan did too. Then he looked at her and said firmly, "That's because we are." She was touched, but she didn't cry, because now crying was for when something broke, and here everything was being built. Every simple gesture was a brick, every touch on the arm while cooking, every kiss on the forehead before heading to work, every whispered good morning before sunrise. It wasn't about the house they lived in. It was about the home they were becoming for each other. One late afternoon, sitting on the front steps, Valeria leaned her head on Logan's shoulder while Nico played with a toy truck in the dirt yard. "Have you ever thought that this could all go wrong?" she asked, looking out at the copper-colored horizon. "Every day," he answered with a slight smile. "But I also think that if it goes right, it'll be the best thing I've ever done." She closed her eyes for a moment, and for the first time she felt she could rest there, because finally she wasn't building alone. What began with crooked pancakes and afternoon laughter soon became something bigger. The little house without luxury now sheltered a quiet but real love, and Logan knew more and more that it was the only future he wanted to exist in. But the past, with its obligations, public image, and business demands, never stopped knocking at the door. Whitaker Greentech, his clean energy startup, had grown too big to ignore. The partners pushed for more involvement. The investors wanted answers. The story of a CEO who disappeared to live with an unknown woman in a modest neighborhood started to spread through websites and magazines. Logan listened to it all in silence during a long board meeting. He sat at the head of the glass-walled room overlooking Phoenix's skyline. All eyes were on him, but his mind was at home, with Valeria and Nico waiting for him with makeshift pasta and dinosaur bedtime stories. At the end of the meeting, he slowly stood and simply said, "Schedule a press conference. I'll speak." Days later, the company's headquarters auditorium was packed. Journalists, cameras, flashes, partners, investors, longtime collaborators. Logan wore a dark blue suit, no tie. His scruffy beard and calm eyes gave him a look that was less corporate and more human. Valeria stood quietly in the back of the room next to Nico. She wore a simple beige dress, flat sandals, and her hair down. Nervous, she didn't know exactly what he would say. Logan had only asked her to trust him. He walked up to the stage, took a deep breath, and began. "Good afternoon. I know many of you expected a technical speech, numbers, projections, but that's not what I'm here for today." The room fell silent. Journalists adjusted their microphones. "In recent months, I stepped away. Many people questioned me, and I could come up with 1,000 excuses. But the truth is, I was finding the part of myself I had lost." Some murmurs began among the executives. Logan continued, "I founded this company with a dream to change the world, but in trying to do that, I lost sight of what's most important, of what truly transforms. And that transformation didn't begin on a spreadsheet. It began when I saw a woman carrying her child, being evicted from her home with a kind of dignity and strength I didn't even know how to name." Valeria clutched her chest. Nico squeezed her hand tightly. "That woman," Logan said, pointing to the back of the room, "taught me what it really means to love. She doesn't have a famous last name. She's never sat on a board, but she builds something none of us here could ever buy. She builds home." His eyes welled with tears. The entire room fell silent. "Today, I'm announcing my resignation as CEO of Whitaker Greentech. I'll remain on the board, but my priority has changed. I'm dedicating myself fully to the foundation. I want to build, with Valeria, something that brings real dignity to people, starting with the invisible families in this city." Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, but Logan didn't listen. He walked to the back of the room and held out his hand to Valeria, who was trembling. "Come with me," he said softly, just for her. She hesitated for a second, but went. He led her to the stage, hand in hand, with the entire auditorium on its feet. "You can write whatever you want," he said, looking straight into the cameras. "But the real headline is this: today, I'm leaving an empire to build a home, because she is my home." Valeria, with tears in her eyes, couldn't hold back the emotion. Logan pulled her close and embraced her right there, under the flashes, the questions, and with the whole world watching. It wasn't about exposure, it was about choice. And for the first time, she was chosen, in front of everyone. Time passed like it wasn't in a hurry, but knew exactly where it needed to go. 2 years after that press conference, many things had changed, except what really mattered. Logan never went back to being the man he once was, and he didn't want to. He traded ties for simple t-shirts, long meetings for afternoons at the community center, and expensive restaurant dinners for nights cooking beside Valeria, with Nico tossing flour around the kitchen. The neighborhood, once just an address, was now home. There, they built something that endured prejudice, fear, and the past. They created a life filled with affection. The small house they shared now had color, plants in the windows, and photos on the walls, not from exotic trips, but from everyday moments that became extraordinary. Nico with ice cream all over. His face, Valeria laughing with paint on her hands, Logan asleep with an open book on his chest. That spring afternoon, the park was in bloom, with children running barefoot and families having picnics under the trees. The sky was a clean blue, as if the world had been washed from the inside out. Valeria wore a light white linen dress and simple sandals. Her hair was loose, dancing in the wind. Logan wore dark jeans and a light cotton shirt. In his left pocket, quietly, a yellow flower. They sat on a checkered blanket with a basket full of fruit and sandwiches. Nico ran nearby, holding an envelope in his hands. "Dad, can I give it to her now?" he asked, eyes sparkling with excitement. Logan nodded with a calm smile. Valeria watched curiously, not understanding. Nico walked up to her with confident steps and handed her the envelope. "It's for you, Mommy." Valeria took it, opened it, and found 2 simple rings inside. Her heart skipped a beat. When she looked up, Logan was already standing, holding the yellow flower in his hand. He knelt down slowly. There was no audience, no flashes, just the breeze, the smell of grass, and the gaze of someone who knew every part of her, and chose to love her anyway. "I could have asked you to marry me that day, in front of the world," he began. "But I realized you deserve more than a stage. You deserve something intimate, quiet, and real, like everything we've built." Valeria covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Valeria Mendoza, you saved me. You taught me how to live. You gave me a son who's the best part of me. And you showed me that true love doesn't need luxury, just courage. Will you keep building this home with me for the rest of our lives?" She nodded, eyes full of tears. "Yes," she whispered, before letting out a soft laugh. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Logan slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and she did the same. Nico clapped excitedly, not fully understanding what it all meant. Soon after, with a few close friends and the children from the project, they exchanged improvised vows on the grass, with an out-of-tune guitar playing in the background and the sounds of life happening all around. Valeria looked at Logan, held his hands tightly and said, "You saw me when no one else did. And you didn't love the perfect version. You loved the real one. Now I know, love doesn't have to be grand, it just has to be honest. True love transforms." And in that moment, as the leaves danced in the wind and the sun touched their faces gently, the world seemed to learn along with them that love isn't measured by what shines, but by what stays. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how this journey touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, like the video, share it with someone else who loves deep, real stories, and subscribe to the channel to keep following every emotion with us. And before you go, I've picked another touching story that will move you even more deeply. Don't miss it. It might be exactly what your heart needed to hear today.